want you to understand the benefit of trading under the AfCFTA. Going by estimates and going on record, it's going to create a market access for over 1.3 billion people.
That's a lot of people.
GDP estimate of 3.4 trillion USD. It's going to open the borders for Africa to trade seamlessly.
That was going to be what I would ask you next. Any policy frameworks, unified policy frameworks in Africa that govern cross-border data flows, and what can be done to address these barriers. Hey there! You're welcome to the CSEA Podcast. I am Onuh Onyinye, your host, and I'm joined today by Mr. Anthony Bisong, a research associate here at CSEA, who will delve into cross-border data sharing in Africa under the African Continental Free Trade Area. You're welcome to the podcast, Mr. Anthony.
Good to be here.
Okay, so we want to talk about cross-border data transfers or data sharing under the AfCFTA. But before we dive into that, can you just give us an explainer of what the AfCFTA is and the role it plays in intra-African trade?
Okay, the AfCFTA, that is the African Continental Free Trade Area, is a trade agreement, that creates a single market for trading in Africa. Going by a number of member states, it is the largest in the world, and it's aimed at boosting intra-African trade, ensuring the free movement of people, goods and services, and then ensuring Africa's growth and development. So it is an ambitious agreement that is meant to reposition Africa in the path of growth and development.
Okay. So what did trade under the AfCFTA look like in the past? And what changes does cross-border data sharing introduce to the already existing trade dynamics in Africa?
Okay, first of all, before answering your questions, I really want you to understand the benefit of trading under the AfCFTA, of which, first of all, market access. We are told, going by estimates and going on record, it's going to create a market access for over 1.3 billion people.
That's a lot of people.
There's a lot of people, and an estimate of GDP estimate of 3.4 trillion USD. Okay. So that is really massive. So it's going to open the borders for Africa to trade seamlessly, and then grow our current intra-African trade, which currently hovers around 15-16%, to around 32% by 2035, if it becomes fully operational, of which in 2021, that is January 2021, the AfCFTA became operational. So it's a good thing. And cross-border trade, there's actually no protocol on the cross-border data flows in the AfCFTA. But going by the African Union Convention on Cybersecurity and Data, I think that is like a baseline for countries to adopt, in trying to ensure personal data. Unlike in Europe, where they have a harmonized system, where there's a easy transfer of data, going by what their law provides. In Africa, we really don't have that because we have a fragmented system. So among the 54 member states, very few have data protection laws. And then until we get all member states to set up data protection law, and like I mentioned earlier of the baseline, the African Convention on Cybersecurity, we cannot achieve that. And you understand that right now we are moving towards digital economy. It is very important, going by the protocol, the AfCFTA protocol on trading goods, and then the AfCFTA protocol as well on trading services, as well as the digital trade protocol. It is really, really important that aspect is addressed. But for now, since we have fragmented laws in Africa, our trade policies have not been harmonized, and then cross-border data flows itself, when it comes to data protections law, have not really been instituted by the different countries. It's quite a challenge, but we hope we get there. It's a gradual process.
All right. So you just mentioned that data protection laws across Africa are fragmented, and that was going to be what I would ask you next. If there are any policy frameworks, unified policy frameworks in Africa that govern cross-border data flows, and if they in any way align or not align with the AfCFTA framework for trade in Africa.
Yeah, nice one. Okay, so going by what is really happening, now, very few countries, like I mentioned earlier, you have the likes of South Africa, Nigeria, Kenya, Mauritius, having data protection laws.
Okay.
But currently, like I said, most of the member states don't really have that. And then we can take a strong baseline from the African Union Convention on Cybersecurity and Data Protection. Yes, we can take that. If countries can adopt that and then set up their systems, first of all, we need to have an harmonized one because there are laws that don't allow transfer of data from maybe states of origin. For instance, it's not, there are laws you might want to trade maybe with an African country and requires transfer of data. Maybe the country of destination don't really have a data protection law. It becomes difficult and it exposes the data privacy. It goes against the data privacy laws governing, going by the convention. So it's really important we get to push for that drive. And I would say that the world is becoming a global space going by technology, going by IT, of which digital economy, which requires high level of technology and data. Data is very important, especially data for customers, for businesses. Businesses are now migrating, are now operating digitally. So we are moving away from the level of where you have tangible stuff. So to services, digitally delivered product and services, they are really taking center stage, e-commerce and all of that. So there is need for African countries to have that harmonized system. We really don't have it now. And on a personal note, I also push for going by what is happening and the importance of data, of course, border data transfer. There should be a protocol on that. Even if the digital protocol does not really address that, the AfCFTA protocol on trading services, as well as the GATS, that is the General Agreement on Trading Services by the WTO, World Trade Organization, also gives room for data protection. So it is important for us to leverage and harness the benefit of digital trade economy. There is need to have that and then to institutionalize it across member states in Africa.
All right.
Thank you.
So you just mentioned that there could be benefits to harmonized trade laws, harmonized data transfer laws across African countries. So what I want to mention or what I want to ask is that there are some African countries that have data localization laws and policies that restrict cross-border data transfers, especially when it comes to consumer data, data that kind of has direct tie to the sovereignty of that country. So how do these policies impact trade facilitation? And what balance should be struck between data security and economic integration?
Yeah, thank you. Going by your question, before now, we had a fragmented trade systems in Africa where you had high level of non-tariff barriers where countries can just sit down and they review their laws based on what is convenient for them. Okay. We had a fragmented system when it comes to issues of custom. We had a complex custom procedure that is prior to AfCFTA. And then with the AfCFTA, there's tariff concession, and we are moving, like I said, is a form of economic integration, market integration, moving from a free market to a common market, from a free trade area to a common market, and then to a common custom union. So it is like I said, the AfCFTA is cool and then would help us achieve that. Then going by your question, it is very important. Like I said, Africa, we operated in silos. We never operated as a bloc. And then going by, like I said, the AfCFTA, the largest free trade area in the world, going by a number of member states, we need to. It's a move that each member state, beyond political rhetorics of yes, we want the AfCFTA. African leaders need to take the right step in the right direction, and that is one, this issue of data, this cross-border data flow. First thing first, every member state, the 54 signatories, and even that was last time I checked, 89% of the 54 signatories, that is over 48 member states, have ratified and deposited their instrument. It is very important that they also indigenously begin to develop data protection laws, which aligns with, like I said, the African Union Convention on Cybersecurity and Personal Data. So that there can be that, because first of all, if transferring your data to, let's say, a country like Uganda, and then maybe apparently there is no data protection law there, it's definitely a threat because exposure and all of that. And then, restriction is going to be a challenge. And then it's going to also affect the trade in services. When you're talking of trade in services, they are intangible. Services are intangible. Right now, 5 sectors have already been liberalized: the communication sector, the financial services sector, business and professional services, transport services, tourism and transport-related services, transport services, tourism and travels-related services. So it is very important that data would have to flow. Yes. Mode of exchange. If, for instance, you want to travel for maybe a holiday in South Africa, and then you are booking your maybe hotels, and then they're requiring certain data from you. Most of if the country in question don't have data protection laws, it becomes a threat to you, and then it can become very vulnerable to attacks by cyber crimes and all of that. So it is very important that the African countries get to come together, fix their economy, fix their data protection law to really leverage their benefits and ensure trading under the AfCFTA will drive inclusiveness and economic growth.
It's nice that you mentioned that countries need to come together to leverage data. So that feeds into the next question I'm about to ask. Many African countries face digital infrastructure challenges. So apart from the need to have these laws or unify the laws on data, on cross-border data sharing, they face digital infrastructure challenges. So how does the digital divide across African countries affect seamless cross-border data transfers? And what can be done to address these barriers?
Okay, going by internet penetration in the continent, so far globally, I think the continent has the lowest so far. Going by internet penetration, and there are moves and then there are projections. The good thing about it is we have the highest population of young people, and then it's an advantage, something that can be harnessed.
How is this an advantage?
Yeah, it is because internet, so far it's been growing between 2010 and 2023. Africa has been the highest, fastest growing when it comes to internet penetration in the world, because other economies they're almost at their peak. Not that we're fastest growing. Others are doing very well, going by global standards. But we still have the market, the potential, the untapped market, yes, and to take advantage of that. So we still have that. So it is very important. First of all, digital, it's a problem, the challenge, infrastructural challenge, of which the likes of the African Development Bank are making efforts with regards setting up trade corridors. First of all, we need that connectivity, road connectivity. Part of the AfCFTA is to ensure free movement of people, goods and services. So they are built towards creating quick corridors across Africa. First of all, we should be able to go through Africa by road. That is first thing first, that's possible. And then we can take advantage of other means of transportation. And then when we achieve that, it's like I said, it's a market that is still untapped. So we need investors. That's why there's even projection for foreign direct investment. So if foreign direct investment can come in with regards driving internet connectivity penetration as well, we can push and then achieve that growth. And the divide, like we said, first of all, literacy. Literacy is also an issue in Africa, of which I believe by the time we start, African countries try to as much as operationalize the AfCFTA in real sense. All countries come together and ensure we achieve that. We can achieve to a large extent that success when it comes to growing our literacy, building capacity, ensuring we have foreign direct investment in the area of ICT and setting up our infrastructure. Like I said, is a first step. Like I used to tell people, Europe was not built. EU, which is like a replica of what we're trying to set up in Africa, didn't just achieve market integration in 1 year or in 2 years. It took them it's a long-term plan that they got to where they are. So it is a gradual. It's just for African leaders. Beyond the political will, they also need the political power, the right investment in infrastructure targeted at developing the digital economy. It's a whole lot, and then we must be deliberate about that. So if we do that, we can bridge that gap. The divide is there, it's obvious, because if you go to some countries, they're not even accessible by road, going by their location. And then even if there are crises and lots of, for instance, take Nigeria, for instance, where during the crisis, the peak of the Boko Haram, they were destroying infrastructure, especially the marks for the mobile networks and all of that. So all those, until we go beyond that and see that this is what will aid our development and our growth, we cannot really achieve that. So, but we look forward to a continent if the AfCFTA becomes operational in full sense, maybe by 2040, 2050, as projected by the World Bank, we can achieve that and, ensure market integration and then, drive for economic integration in line with AU Agenda 2063.
Okay. I like how you said it's a long-term project, because it's one thing to, be talking about the cross-border transfer of data, but it's also one thing to recognize that we somehow, despite our potential, are still a long way from, employing these things in full force. You mentioned capacity trainings, you mentioned our investment, you mentioned the fact that we have low literacy when it comes to digitalization or even the use of digital infrastructure. So I think, you made a very good point with that. So the next and last question I have is, how have other regional trade blocs, such as the EU and the ASEAN, handled cross-border data flows? And what lessons can Africa learn from their experiences? What can we adopt? Yes.
Okay. Like I told you, the EU has the most integrated market.
Okay.
They have a system. So cross-border data flow in the EU, it's quite, they are at a very advanced level. Like I said, the EU didn't become EU in a year or 2 or 5 years. It's something that they've gone through a process, and it's a stage, just like we have the 5 stages of development. So I believe, yes, we can replicate EU, and that's why most times I say, let's go learn the lessons. Although the difference between us and EU is we're exposed to all these technologies now compared to the EU that hadn't all of this. But I think Africa needs to come together and then understudy the market, understudy how they moved from a free trade area to a common market, now to a common custom union, right now to a monetary zone. So it's a phase they had to go through. And just like I was going through the Association of South and East Asian markets, that is the one you just called earlier. Yeah, they had a model which worked for them, where you had the Asian tigers, all of them came up from there. They had a system that ensured, indigenizing and then driving growth. What they did was, for instance, take in China, for instance, they run an autarkious economy. They had to close their borders to ensure they put their economy together and then achieve the economic growth. Look at what happened. Same thing to Singapore, to Malaysia, to Thailand, and all of that. So those are really advanced economies who came up with laws that understood what it meant by adopting indigenous laws. Beyond trying to, unlike Nigeria where we do copycat, where we just get policies from maybe
copy and paste,
and then you try to replicate that. No, they had to, they consider their peculiarity, had to ensure whatever policies they are bringing in goes through the system and then is acceptable by the system before adopting it. So I think we need to push for that. We need to ensure all these are set in place. There are fantastic lessons to learn from the EU. There are lessons to learn from ASEAN economies, but I would say they had their own peculiarities. So that does not mean what work for them might work for Africa. I know Africa is an interesting nation, 54 countries, 55, but 54 in line with the AfCFTA, with different, languages, having different peculiarities, different topographies, but it will take, like I said, it will take us Africans to become Africa to really grow the continent. That Pan-Africanism need to be cross-cutting, from South Africa down to Egypt, down to Morocco, Nigeria, Democratic Republic of Congo, Botswana. We need to see ourselves as one, irrespective of our language, our ethnicity, our colors. We need to see ourselves as one and see that we can make the continent work. So until we get that, we'll just be lying to ourselves. Like I said, beyond going for political meetings, beyond beyond what we say, okay, we want to do this, beyond the theories, we need to show that political power and the political will as well to see that the AfCFTA work. So before I end the podcast, there was an experience a trader shared with us where he was trying to, shortly after the operationalization of the AfCFTA, we're trying to move his product from Abidjan to Lagos, Nigeria. And then he said when he got to a port somewhere around Benin Republic, he was like, yeah, he's taking advantage of the AfCFTA to trade. At some countries he was able to scale through, but when he got to some, they told him, Oga, as we speak now, that is yours. This is where we generate our revenue from. Yeah. So we cannot, the tariff concession for now is not, it's not a domestic law, so we cannot work. So it was really difficult. He had to comply with the laws, which were anti most of the AfCFTA policies. So it's quite difficult, and we as Africans must live beyond that to see that we make the AfCFTA work, be ready to forgo most of our revenues gotten through tariff, and see that we work together as a continent. And all of us will benefit from it. Yeah, massive market, 1.3 billion Africans. Thank you.
Okay, so just as a sidebar, how long do you think it would take for Africa to catch up to the EU's, level, like in years? How long?
Well, I can't estimate that because the AfCFTA became operational in 2021. This is just 4 years. But
that's still at the beginning.
Go to Lagos, go to Kano, go to Port Harcourt. Look out for businesses who are the drivers, the formal and informal sector. Ask them about the AfCFTA and gauge their awareness. Some of them don't even understand the provisions of the protocols. So first of all, you need to understand an agreement before you start taking advantage of it. They just know that it will open borders. But our businesses, let's talk about Nigeria, our Nigerian businesses positioned to trade under the AfCFTA. Funny enough, what we say, everybody is watching out for the next nation. Kenya is looking out Nigerians move. Nigeria is looking at South Africa's move. South Africa is looking at Egypt's move. What are they bringing to the table? What are they ready to let go? What are their schedule of commitment with regards to trade, especially when it comes to trading services? So all of them. So until we go beyond that and then see ourselves as, the big boys, I'll call them, the big players in Africa's economy, Egypt, South Africa, Nigeria, Kenya, Algeria, until they come together and say, this is what would work. That can drive. But so I can't estimate. I can't estimate the number of years it will take for us to achieve all the objectives of the AfCFTA. But I think it's a gradual process, so there might be some adjustment, and most of the protocols are still under negotiation at the moment. So when you talk about protocol intellectual property, protocol on competition, investment, as well as even women and youth in trade, so they are still ongoing, and until we get that right and get everything set.
Okay.
But let's work with the World Bank's projection of 2050, 2035, and we hope to achieve something. Although there were projections for 2025, way back before the operationalization, that was 2021, but we're yet to see that materialize. And until a study to show the state and how Africans have benefited, or businesses that benefited from trading under the AfCFTA since its operationalization in 2021, I can't really say for a fact how long it will take us to achieve that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Anthony, for coming on the CC Podcast.
Thank you. Nice having me.
Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the CC Podcast. Make sure to subscribe to our podcast to get the latest updates on our new releases. See you next time.